Assassin's Creed Shadows marks a very special milestone in the series as the first entry developed with a total focus on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series machines and PC. It's a bold transition with a clear payoff in its technology, one that finally puts last-gen PS4 and Xbox One console support aside to allow Shadows the full provision of Anvil Engine's latest features. Firstly, lighting and shadow accuracy is greatly improved via a new, though still optional, ray-traced global illumination setting, while ray-traced reflections are also possible on PC and PS5 Pro. Procedural weather simulation for wind, rain, and fog are also now integrated into the world design. And lastly, we have more exhaustive use of world destruction physics. All combined, the more complex nature of Shadow's world is beyond what was possible in 2023's cross-gen release Assassin's Creed Mirage, and it gives us the evolutionary jump I've long been hoping to see from the series. Developer Ubisoft Quebec debuts all of this with Shadow's feudal Japan setting, except to enjoy every new feature, to get the so-called next-gen Assassin's Creed experience, it's necessary to pick the right hardware and graphics mode. Digital Foundry's own Oliver Mackenzie will be dissecting the PS5 Pro upgrades in a future video, so stay tuned for that. In this tech review though, I'm tackling the base consoles, the regular PS5, Xbox Series X and S models. The first question being, does the 4 teraflop Xbox Series S still hand in a decent experience on its single 30 FPS mode, or are there trade-offs to consider? And out of the 3 modes available to Xbox Series X and PS5, the 60 FPS performance, 40 FPS balanced, and 30 FPS quality options, which is the ideal way to play? Let's find out. The new tech of the Anvil Engine deserves a moment in the spotlight. After all, on console and PC, this is the first series entry to officially adopt ray tracing, and it has a huge impact on the presentation of its world. For PS5, Series X and S in particular, we get RT Global Illumination, adding richer, more realistic ambient light bounce and shading. Alas, while ray-traced reflections are also included in Shadows, they are reserved for the PC release and PS5 Pro, meaning we resort to the screen space method for reflections on the base consoles. RTGI though is in place on all formats, though there is another catch to consider. Specifically, it only engages globally across the entire explorable map on PS5 and Series X using their 30 FPS quality and 40 FPS balanced modes. On the 60 FPS performance mode, however, we switch to Ubisoft's classic baked GI method, as also used in AC Valhalla and Mirage. The exception to this is the hideout area, which enables RTGI regardless of your selected mode, but will also always run at 30 frames per second. As for Xbox Series S, RTGI only appears in this same, very limited capacity in the hideout area, but never beyond it. To show that all-important ray tracing upgrade, let's see Series X in action. For a game with such a diversity in weather states, multiple season changes, plus destructible environments, Shadow's world is more dynamic than any Assassin's Creed game before it. The domino effect being that the real-time ray-traced approach has an advantage in being more adaptable. It better simulates light and shadow interactions across a constantly changing environment, while the older baked GI method of the 60 FPS performance mode must still rely on pre-calculated lighting states for each season. Outdoors then, the impact is clear to see. The RTGI of the quality mode adds richer, more detailed pockets of shade between objects, like these clay pots, the ox carts, and vegetation. Likewise, you'll notice it in the depth of shading on character faces in daylight, and especially the interiors of shops, where the baked GI method struggles to match up. Finally, you'll also see an all-round improvement in lighting. Diffuse light bounce from nearby coloured scenery has an impact on the world, helping to realistically lighten shaded patches on the ground with an appropriate hue. Ubisoft's classic baked GI method is still respectable, but has clear limitations. Also, sadly, all of these limits apply to the Series S release across the main world in the same manner as the 60 FPS performance modes on Series X and PS5. It oversaturates certain details with colour in an attempt to match up to the RTGI lighting, while interiors and up-close character detail lack the same shading depth. The other catch is that Series S only runs at 30 frames per second, so there's really no performance upside to missing out here, and it's the worst of both worlds compared to the Series X options. As a kind of consolation, the hideout area, which is a small customizable sandbox that lets us decorate and plant buildings as we like, does engage RTGI on Series S. It's possible to enjoy it there, but for the rest of the game, the reality is that Series S runs at a third of the compute power of the Series X, which has a knock-on effect for its features. It's a huge win for Series X and PS5 then, and while the lack of ray-traced reflections is a shame, the RTGI allows for a much grander payoff for Assassin's Creed Shadows world design. Another major Anvil Engine upgrade is in its physics. Ubisoft's efforts are extensive in this aspect for Shadows, helping to inject some much needed energy into the game's landscapes. Riding to your next mission, you'll spot a procedural weather system called Atmos, generating clouds overhead in a dynamic manner. Paired with that is wind simulation, using fluid dynamics to create everything from light gusts to gales, impacting the forests, cherry blossom petals, and even the direction of rainfall in the process. And to top that off, there's a wider spread use of destruction physics now. In towns, for example, it's possible to smash most objects decorating the market stalls, or even slice through fabric, with the tailline matching your katana's arc. Also, another neat touch I noticed is that while sneaking through long grass, each grass blade flattens in a persistent manner as you crawl through. It's all seriously impressive stuff, and makes the world feel more tangible, interactive, to a degree that wasn't possible with the cross-gen Assassin's Creeds before it. Given Shadow's open world is filled with these complex hills, valleys, and large settlements, Ubisoft has gone to great lengths to also optimize its terrain streaming. To that end, a new virtualized geometry system is added to Anvil Engine, similar in principle to Unreal Engine 5's Nanite, allowing geometry across a scene to gradually subdivide into smaller polygonal meshes the further it appears in the distance. It's a cost-saving measure, but one that's seamless, and lets Ubisoft Quebec's artists build out its world without resorting to more obvious LOD steps. All of these technologies are included on PS5 and Series X, alongside the weather and destruction physics, though there is one omission on Series S. A new hair strand physics setting, as seen on PC, enables on PS5 and Series X permanently on their quality and balanced modes. It's a beautiful addition that affects most characters sporting tresses of some kind. Individual strands of hair, like on our shinobi heroine Naoe, animate dynamically, each one interacting with a neighbouring strand of hair as she pivots, while wind simulation has an impact too. The catch, however, is that the 60 FPS performance mode reverts to a simplified card system for each hair tuft, where the more complex strand physics model only re-engages for the hideout area and in cutscenes. And once again, Series S misses out on this feature entirely on its single mode. Series S runs with the basic hair setting, though strand physics do appear, of course, in pre-rendered cinematics. In a three-way comparison between performance, balanced, and quality modes, it's clear that RTGI and hair physics are the main factors to consider. They are the big features you stand to gain or lose depending. Now, there are a few other differences, not least of which is the native resolution per mode. Since there are admittedly quite a few variables here, I've put everything into one table to make it easy to digest. The key point being that Series X and PS5 run at between 1080p and 1620p on their quality modes, which takes a hit to a lower range of 810p to 1440p on the performance mode. The 40 FPS balanced mode, meanwhile, runs at a narrower range of 900p to 1440p in my testing, which marginally avoids the lowest low of the performance mode. In that case, we do keep the RTGI and hair strand physics at least, making it a pretty good compromise. All of these modes upscale to a final 4K image using what appears to be Ubisoft's in-house temporal anti-aliasing upsampling. As for Xbox Series S, the cutbacks run deep as you might expect. Series S runs at a dynamic range of 720p to 1080p natively before being upscaled to 1620p as the target image, with an obvious knock-on effect to image quality. Beyond the native resolutions, there are a few other differences to consider. Taking Series X an example, though this applies to PS5 equally, you'll notice shadow quality is dropped a setting on the performance mode. Beyond that, texture quality, draw distances, and all the physics-based extras added to Anvil are identical regardless of which mode you pick. It perhaps goes without saying that PS5 and Series X are matched visually, and taking the 30 FPS quality mode in example, there's really nothing to split the two. The resolution setups and graphics settings are an exact match. More curious though are the Series S downgrades. We've seen the limited RTGI, the chopped hair physics, and the lower resolution bounds on Series S already. It also only runs at 30 frames per second, but there are a few other cutbacks worth touching on. Firstly, there's lower quality texture assets in place across the environment, where the fine fabric on clothing, for example, takes a noticeable hit compared to Series X. It runs with lower quality shadows too, in line with the 60 FPS performance mode setting on the other consoles. Thankfully, beyond this, Ubisoft presents Shadow's world at a matching quality on Series S, with broad views resolving the exact same level of detail for virtual acres ahead. On to performance testing, and the quality mode justifies a focus first, given it's offering a wealth of new Anvil Engine features. I'm also glad to say it's well optimized in targeting 30 frames per second. From the very opening siege on the Iga province, to the rapid open world roaming on horseback with Naoe, it's broadly a locked 30 on both PS5 and Series X. The added demands of RTGI and the new hair physics aren't an issue here. The only snag I can see is actually a byproduct of using dynamic resolution scaling, again going from 1080p to 1620p. Much like other recent Assassin's Creed titles using DRS, this does at times cause drops where the rendering load changes rapidly. So, for example, tilting the camera skyward and then abruptly down to complex scenery gives the renderer only a moment to adjust the pixel structure. Alas, in that window, there will be dropped frames. It happens so rarely outside of these forced moments though, with battles only occasionally showing a few odd dropped frames at points as the camera pans around. Other than that, it's a robust 30 FPS experience on both machines. Of course, 30 FPS might be a compromise too far for some to enjoy Assassin's Creed Shadows ray tracing, and that's where the balanced mode shines. For those equipped with a 120Hz display, the balanced mode unlocks in the menus for 40 FPS gameplay instead. The resolution range drops, but the RTGI and hair physics are intact for all aspects of gameplay, and it's highly recommended. We're getting a mostly locked 40 frames per second, albeit with a similar catch to the quality mode, in that, on occasion, sudden camera movements catch the DRS off guard. PS5 and Series X are well optimized for this mode otherwise, besides the triggering of a few dropped frames. The one additional catch to this mode is that the hideout area and cutscenes will still switch to a 30 FPS cap. In fact, walking up this mountain path to the hideout causes this frame rate change in real time, 40 down to 30 and back again, as you pass an invisible threshold. It's unclear how well this area might have held up at the usual 40 FPS, but at least, for all gameplay elsewhere, we're getting an extra 10 frames per second. Rounding out is of course the performance mode, where there's no denying the advantage of a 60 frames per second update. In terms of controller response, especially while timing ripostes in combat, it's a hugely welcome option to have. We're at a crossroads though, as is so often the case this generation, between getting cutting edge features at 30 FPS or missing out at 60. And sadly, it's hard to shake the sense that we're losing a lot of what makes Shadows a next generation Assassin's Creed game while using this mode. In terms of its delivery at 60 FPS at least, PS5 and Series X hold well at the target most of the time, but be warned that it is the mode most prone to drops. Dramatic camera swings will trigger brief lurches into the mid-50s more frequently. Thankfully, these kinds of drops are easily covered by VRR technology if your display supports it. Also, once again, cutscenes and the hideout area continue to switch to 30 FPS in this mode, which is all the more jarring coming from a 60 FPS baseline. Finally, we have the Series S version. With its single means of play at 30 FPS, you'd hope the limited use of RTGI, axed hair physics, and its significant resolution cut would qualify it for a tight lock. For a majority of the time, it does admittedly hold up well, but the reality is that there are more noticeable sub-30 drops than, for example, the 30 FPS quality mode on Series X. It's not a deal breaker, but battles and cutscenes are slightly more prone to dips under the line. Unsurprisingly, it's in these moments that the 720p native resolution, the lower bounds of its DRS, appears most obviously. Hence, it makes sense that there is no 40 FPS balanced mode on Series S after all. It's already seemingly at its limit at 30, though at the very least, it holds at the target well in the hideout area with RTGI engaged there. Assassin's Creed Shadows is the series' most exciting new entry in years, with PS5 and Series X at last showing off their mettle via new Anvil Engine features. Simply put, the more physics-based, ray-traced nature of its feudal-era Japan setting is the absolute star of the show this year. The drawback is that we're forced to decide between three modes, a Hobson's choice that either grants 60 FPS gameplay or a more exciting suite of visual upgrades at 30 or 40 FPS. Looking purely at the base consoles here, I'd recommend the 40 FPS mode if possible to demonstrate where the series technology is headed. As for the Series S version, the situation is less impressive. It's the closest we may see to a last-gen rendition of the game in many ways. The cut resolution, the lower texture quality, shadows, limited RTGI, and removed hair strand physics plus that 30 FPS cap are all hard pills to swallow. The adventure is otherwise intact, but perhaps it does not service the generational leap that Shadows is trying to offer here. Still, with all that being said, Ubisoft Quebec deserves praise for putting out a game with such clear technical ambition married to an undeniably compelling setting. Having reviewed a great many Assassin's Creed games for Digital Foundry over the last 14 years, Shadows is a real highlight, and above all, shows the promising direction that the series as a whole is now headed in. That about wraps up this tech review though. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.